Welcome into the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Dynasty Review, looking at 2023 and beyond for the Buccaneers in Dynasty football. I always forget to mention it, but you should know it's, from a super flex point of view, so keep that in mind. Half full PPR doesn't really matter. And maybe we'll throw in other stuff like tight end premium if we need to mention it. Brian, your team, the Buccaneers, they made it to the divisional round of the playoffs. I'm taking a little credit. I mean, everyone's saying this team was going to tank. Obviously, players don't tank, but I was like, man, this team has a lot of good players. Won a Super Bowl a few years ago. I don't think they're tanking, and won the division, made it to the divisional round. So, are you excited for your Buccaneers?
Yeah, I didn't think they were going to be. I definitely didn't think they were going to get as far as they did this year, but I was not super low on them either, just given the status of the division. I remember having that conversation with Dad, in the preseason, where he was like, "Oh, they're gonna suck," and I was like, "They could win their division for sure." I was like, "Who's obviously better than them?" And he was like, "The Saints." And I was like, "I guess that was the easiest answer, but it's just what have we really seen from this division in general over the last couple of years? No real standout dominance, even from the Buccaneers, who've won it, I think 3 years in a row now. 4 maybe, I don't know. But yeah, I think I mean, I like they're still able to be competitive. They kind of figured out their salary cap situation, I believe, right? What are they at?
Yeah, they're 12th.
Yeah, which that was the big thing hanging over their head, supposedly, when Brady was still there. So it was how are they going to pay all of these guys? And they kind of figured it out, and without really adding a crazy standout piece on the offense or anything like that, they maintained their defense. So I'm happy with where they're at. Do I think they can win another Super Bowl in the situation they're in? Not really, given these other powerhouse teams that are obviously involved. It'd be really hard, but I'm happy with them making the playoffs, because everyone's got a chance once you make it to the playoffs, except the Steelers.
Yeah.
Or the Cowboys too.
Yeah. 3 straight years for the Bucs. They actually didn't win the division the year they won the Super Bowl in 2020.
That's right. They were wild card, and then they beat the Saints actually in the playoffs.
Yeah. So yeah, they went 9-8. Todd Bowles is still there, although I thought kind of how that playoff game ended, man, they could fire him potentially, just kind of giving up and not giving your team a chance. They essentially could have got the ball back. They could have forced the Lions to kick a field goal with 45 seconds left, or punt the ball. And it was a pretty long field goal. It was a 49-yarder. And obviously Michael Badgley, that's, not the greatest kicker. And they could have had a chance. I don't know. It was a 1% chance, 2% chance, 3% chance. It's still a chance. So anyways, we don't have to get into that. Even though I just did. Cap space. Yeah, like you said, they've kind of fixed it, over 40 million, 12th most. They have 7 draft picks. So I think they just have, they don't have their 5th, and they have 2 7ths. Free agents, Baker's the big one. Baker and Mike Evans are the 2 big free agents that matter on this team for fantasy, for real football. So we'll start with Baker, and I think he's going to come back to the Bucs. That makes the most sense. He's probably going to get paid a good amount. Hopefully they do it in a way of all right, let's give you essentially a 1-year contract, and we can get out of it if you just kind of suck again next year. And if you don't, then we have you for a couple more years. So hopefully that's kind of the way they go. We don't have to. I think it's kind of crazy. We should normalize just not having to pay the quarterbacks. Just well, you're now the richest quarterback in the NFL because you were the latest to get a contract. So I think it just kind of ruins your team when you do that. Look at the Giants with Daniel Jones and stuff like that. So, so Baker, I kind of mentioned it during the season. To me, he was the ideal QB3 I want on my team, because it can give me flexibility and stuff with all right, if I have 2 studs and Baker, maybe I can trade one of my stud quarterbacks and get a haul for him and feel comfortable with Baker as my QB2 and in a super flex. So are you still kind of there with Baker, the ideal QB3 and awesome QB4?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I don't know. Like Baker, I've always kind of liked him. Like he never really, like when he was on the Browns still, like he was kind of, I don't know if the situation was necessarily bad, but they were obviously a very run heavy team when he was there, but still throwing for 3,500 plus in his first 3 years, over 20 touchdowns. It's like, obviously the turnovers was like the big thing with him. So I feel like it wasn't necessarily his fault why he was bad earlier in his career, like, or considered to be bad. Like, not that he was like doing himself a ton of favors. He's definitely not like a star or anything like that. Like, nothing compared to where his draft capital was in the actual NFL draft all those years ago. But I thought definitely a good enough quarterback, and we kind of saw that this year play out.
Yep. Probably the best weapons he had. I mean, he had like Odell and Jarvis Landry there for a year or two before Odell started to get injured. So, you can argue these are the best weapons he's ever had overall. So, yeah, I mean, he had his best year, 4,000 yards, 28 touchdowns, played every game, 10 interceptions. That was good for QB 10 this year. Probably most years it's probably closer to QB 15, but he was QB 10 this year, and he was just a solid streamer quarterback for redraft. He was a good QB too when all these quarterbacks got hurt. So I like Baker. Hopefully he goes back to the Bucs because I think that's kind of the best for him. Although they did lose their offensive coordinator to the Panthers head coach, so it's kind of maybe a big deal there. Like he turned around Geno, turned around Baker, so could be a big deal there. But we'll kind of know more here soon what they're going to do with him. Any interest? I mean, are you still holding Kyle Trask at this point? Like holding out that maybe he becomes the starter if Baker doesn't come back?
Only until we know if Baker's there or not. He's totally like fine to cut. Like I still have him on my Dynasty roster because I just kind of didn't know who I was, or like what that situation was going to be throughout the year. And I mean, the writing was kind of on the wall with Baker playing the way he was like during the season, and obviously in the preseason too. Like he kind of won out the job, but definitely like there was a path for Trask going into the year, and even like it took more than halfway through the year, I think, before we were kind of like, all right, like this is Baker's for sure. Like he's locked in, like he's playing well. Yeah. So yeah, I think he's fine to cut. But if you can hold him until we know until Baker's back, which we should know like relatively soon.
About a month or so, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, hold until then and then cut him if Baker's there.
Yeah, agreed. Rachaad White, one of the biggest surprises of the season. Like, I don't want to say I was completely wrong about him because I didn't completely avoid him. I don't think anyone saw this coming. RB7 overall in half PPR. And then probably from like about week 7 on, it looks like when he started. Yeah, week 7 on, he was RB2. So he averaged 15.9 half PPR points a game. He was just awesome. He was basically like what do we call him?
We called him McCaffrey Jr. or something. Wasn't it him that we called that?
Yeah, because I said like poor man's McCaffrey, and then I was like, that's kind of disrespectful because he's been really good. So yeah, like McCaffrey Light or Junior, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, he had over 1,500 total yards, 64 catches, 9 total touchdowns. Dude was just awesome. Like totally. I guess I expected it to play out was like to him to be good for fantasy because he's just getting volume, and then like they kind of work someone else in because he wasn't super efficient, which is kind of where it was going. But then I think it was Chase Edmonds who they tried to get more involved, and then he got like injured, and it just went back to Rachaad White, and then he started to go off. So I am fine with keeping Rachaad White as a rebuilder, even as a contender, like both. Like if I'm rebuilding, I can maybe sell him off a little bit more in the season. So Rachaad White, is there much to talk about here? I don't know where he's ranked, keep trade cut, but
yeah, well, you look that up. Yeah,
That'd be
like
12.
I don't know if we were necessarily, like you said, we weren't completely surprised. Like, the previous year with Brady still, he was very involved in the passing game, like towards the end of the season.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pulling up those stats real quick, and we just kind of weren't sure. Yeah, it was. I mean, it was kind of throughout the season, but definitely a lot in that second half of the season in 2022, and we just weren't sure if that was going to continue. Obviously, with like the quarterback change and everything, and that's like what really made him like extremely valuable. 64 catches for 550 yards is wonderful for a running back.
Mm-hmm.
It helps supplement so much of that inefficiency on the ground. But yeah, like you said, like I don't think we thought, or like nobody really thought like he was going to be the dude. But it's like, yeah, maybe we should have seen it coming a little bit more in hindsight. It's like they didn't really do anything like behind him. It's like, I know Sean Tucker was like a popular like sleeper pick because it's like, oh, Rachaad White, he's gonna suck, and then Sean Tucker is gonna take over everything. Like
Mm-hmm.
obviously that never materialized. So it was just kind of like, yeah, it was there, but we just didn't necessarily want to believe it.
Yeah, it's like a good lesson to learn. Like, don't undervalue volume, like, especially when the only guy really that, like, if we're talking about Sean Tucker taking over his spot, an undrafted rookie, like, we should probably ignore that and just roll Rachaad with Rachaad White. So, if there's someone legit, if there's a Charbonnet there, second round running back, like, okay, we can be worried about it, but there was Chase Edmonds. I don't even know if he was on the team to start the year, but Chase Edmonds, Keyshawn Vaughn, who people loved, but just hasn't done anything. So yeah, there was really no reason to not like Rachaad White. So yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I will trade him if someone wants to give me a first round pick in kind of probably any draft, just because of the flexibility that gives me. But I just don't know if you're going to get that. That's what he's valued as. I just don't think you can get a 2024 late first or even a random 25 first, which I would probably just take.
Yeah, I mean that's
agree with that.
That's kind of right around where he was being drafted 2 years ago too. I think like towards the end of the second / early to mid, end of the first, early to mid second, like was kind of like where he was pegged. Obviously, he was behind Fournette at that time too, so it was kind of like he was like the new hotness or whatever, as far as like, I mean, not hotness, but you know what I mean. Like he was kind of one of those guys where it's like, oh, he's gonna get a chance because the guy in front of him is old, and this offense is good enough, kind of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Would you take any first 24 late for 24 first or a random 25 first for him?
I don't know. That is kind of tough because, like you said, like I think he does belong on a lot of different style of rosters. Like I don't think you should be thinking he's going to be your RB1, but if you have someone kind of in that same ballpark, like I think that's fine. And he obviously he can be your number one for sure. Mm-hmm. But like if you have him and like I'm just looking at the guys around him, like if you have him and Josh Jacobs or him and Pacheco or like something like that, it's like, yeah, I think I'm okay with that combo as my RB1 and 2. Like, because we know they can be like one of those guys could step up and the other one doesn't have to do quite as much. But I mean, that's not a strong running back room with those two guys. So I could see trading him off, like if you're in like full rebuild, but I think he's a solid hold for most teams.
Yeah. Another thing to mention is Baker is a free agent. So I think if Baker does go and they do roll with like a Kyle Trask, that's severely going to hurt his value there. So something to keep in mind. Sean Tucker's really the only other running back. We already brought him up. I'd still hold on to him if I can because they could be the RB2. That's just where I'm at. Depends on the roster size of your leagues and stuff. I still liked him coming out of college and stuff. So I would still hold him as potential RB2 for this team. So Anything else you haven't said about Sean Tucker?
No, we can move on to the receivers.
Yep. So Mike Evans, one of proven that age doesn't matter for him. I think he was 30 this year, majority of the year. Yeah, he was 30 the whole year. So he'll be 31 to start the year, right? Just did it again. He had one of his best years. Over 1,200 yards, which was better than anything he did with Brady. 13 touchdowns, which is right there with what he did with Brady, so he just keeps doing it. Any concern about him, like not doing it again? Are you buying him if you can? And what are you buying him for? Talk to us about Mike Evans and how you're feeling.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of nailed it as far as he did it again. I mean, obviously it was the age concerns going into this year, and he was kind of one of those outlier guys this season, 30-year-old receiver. I mean, I remember, I think it was Andy from the Fantasy Footballers, since we bring them up, he planted his flag as one of my guys on Mike Evans in the preseason, where he's I just think that, Baker Mayfield's style and Mike Evans, they really mesh well together. And he was totally right on that. Just completely nailed it, again, just what you said about, if Baker's not there, that severely limits Mike Evans for sure. But yeah, he's definitely you can see why he's being valued the way he is, he's kind of just right behind young guys kind of, but he's in front of Diggs and Adams, he's down there with the the older guys in general, his elder statesman kind of a thing, but I guess it kind of just depends on what your roster build is. You definitely have to be a win now team in order to be rostering him. You should just take, if you could get a late first for him. I don't know if that's realistic. I'm seeing a 2025 late first. Yeah, maybe the move is to trade him to a contending team for their 25 first. You might be able to get that done.
Yeah, I'd do that.
Yeah, so that's fine to move off of him. I don't think he's necessarily just gonna fall off the cliff, but age is the concern, and I'm pretty sure, you mentioned him, he is a free agent. So, but I mean, he was drafted by Tampa Bay. He's been good with them his entire career. So you would think, given how their year went, ideally, they bring these two guys back, him and Baker, and just kind of try and do it again. Mm-hmm. And he should just retire there. I don't think he should go to I don't know where he would go. That's 100% better situation. It's you've been there your whole life. You've had a great career, and just, try and do it one more time.
Yeah. He's in a good situation in terms of if he's back on the Bucs, I think that's because Baker's there, and that's good. If he's not on the Bucs, then I think there's just thinking about from his point of view, he probably wants to go to a team that's going to compete. So does he get on, the Bills, the Chiefs, Detroit, Baltimore? Does he get on one of those teams? And still, I think most of those teams, maybe not Baltimore so much, but the other teams I think are really good situations for him. So I think it's pretty safe. He's going to be in a really nice situation. So yeah, I agree. I don't want to necessarily pay for him now. I don't want to spend a first to buy him now. I want to do that in October, November, not in February. So, but to sell him for any first, I'd probably do that if I'm rebuilding, especially.
Yeah, I'd say if he comes back to the Bucs with Baker, and you are a contending team, offer your 25 first to that team. Unless they're competing as well, then you probably won't get him. But it's still worth floating out there. I'm fine doing that even in the preseason.
Yeah,
I know it's a little
nervous.
Yeah, I get it. He doesn't necessarily have injury history, but I know the past does not predict the future when it comes to that stuff. He is getting up there in age and everything, but
yeah,
he plays.
It's also one of those you need your whole team to stay healthy as well. Like I would kind of like to want to see what the first 5-6 weeks of the season, how it plays out, kind of, I guess, with my own team. Not even being concerned about Evans. So just with a guy like that, like if I'm getting a younger player, that's fine. But it's a guy like Evans who's like a rental for 2024. I want to make sure he's being used to like push my team over the top, I guess.
Yeah, but I think a guy like him will maintain value through the season as long as he's healthy as well. And given what like the caveats we already gave, so I think you should be able to get some return. Like you could probably, like if he plays like he was playing this year and your team's not competitive, you should be able to recoup that first for maybe you'd have to push it out another year. But I think that's okay.
Yeah. Godwin, weird year. He did have over 1,000 yards, which is always one of those, like, you're going to be surprised about. I think we were talking about it. Like, he's on pace for this, and that's what he did. Only 2 touchdowns, which is kind of becoming a little bit of a trend for him. Only 10 touchdowns in the last 3 years.
Total.
Combined, yeah. So, it's kind of becoming a trend for him a little bit. I don't mind. He's basically valued according to Keep Trade Cut as like the 203 or the 204. I'm not going to trade that for him. I don't mind throwing anything after like the 206 at him and seeing if I can put him on my team. They do have a potential out for him. So I wouldn't be 100% surprised if he's on a different team, which I don't think is terrible for him. Might be better, actually. Still relatively young. You'll be 28. This will be his year 28 season. So, if I can throw a mid to late second at him, I think I'd do that for Godwin and just take a shot at like, all right, if he gets on a solid team with high passing volume, with a good quarterback, like he could put up another top 20 season or something, right? I know you like Godwin, so do you still feel that way, or would you throw an early second at him?
I'm not exactly sure. Yeah, I probably would. Yeah, again, roster construction and everything like that, right? Like, I think he's a fine, kind of wide receiver 3 with some upside, but not like a super high ceiling at the same time. Like, if his situation changes, like you said, it could get better. It obviously could get worse, but I feel like he's kind of he's a talented player. Like, he's not an elite stud type of dude, but I think for him to be, I mean, this has got to be like an age thing, but for him to be like down where Josh Downs is and stuff like that, like I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of the other guys that are around him. I'm just picking on Josh Downs because he's right there. That's obviously an age thing. But I mean, he's down there with Amari Cooper, Christian Kirk. Both of those guys, I'd rather have them. Yeah, Cooper Kupp's a few spots above him. Rather have him. Him and Christian Watson are probably pretty close for me, honestly. I think he's kind of properly slotted where he needs to be.
Yeah. I think, again, don't want to do an early second, but I'm not going to be surprised if he's a top 20 receiver either on another team or on the Bucs without Mike Evans. So I don't know if I see it with both of them, though. So only other guy really to talk about is Trey Palmer, who was a rookie, flashed last year at times. He was basically their wide receiver 3, but obviously everything went to Evans, Godwin, and like Rashad White. So he's a hold for now. Like, is he going to turn into anything? Probably not. Like, if I can get any third for him, 25 second, 26 second, 26 third, any third, really, any second for sure, I'd probably just take it and just assume he's probably just going to be a roster clogger, but there's slight upside there. I don't know if there's anything you want to say about Trey Palmer.
No, not really. Like, very unlikely that he turns into anything, but he's got youth, and he could easily become the number 2 on the team if one of those other 2 guys we just talked about leaves. I don't know if that makes him good necessarily, but opportunity is a requirement for success. So there you go.
He only had, about 50 yards less than Quinton Johnston. So there's that. He also, like, they used him as kind of like a deep threat. Like, he was kind of, Nebraska. He was basically like their whole offense on Nebraska. So I think he could be a little bit more than just like this deep kind of threat that they were kind of using it. Not really just using him, just at times using him like. So, hold for now. No one else. I mean, Russell Gage is still on the team. What did he have? An Achilles or a ACL? I know I dropped him right when it happened. So it was before the season. I think it was an Achilles. No, it was a ruptured patella tendon in the right knee. So
I was going to say that's the knee, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, he's probably just a drop, unfortunately. And then Cade Otton is what he is. Again, he's just one of those tight ends. You guys, by now, like, if someone wants to throw him in and add something on because they love Michael Mayer or Pat Fryermuth, I'll take it. If not, I'm totally fine with like Cade Otton as my tight end to start the year at least, and I can look to upgrade later on.
Yeah, for sure. I think he's kind of similar to what I said about the Green Bay guys in the last video, where it's very situational kind of thing. I'd rather have him than either of the two Green Bay guys, just because I feel like their situation's pretty much the same, and like if you can trade Musgrave for him plus like a little something, cool. And when I say a little something, I mean like a late third or something like that. You might as well, like I mean he has less target competition, kind of, like you said, like the passes get funneled to Evans, Godwin, and White as it stands right now, but he's definitely a part of the offense, but not a big part.
Yeah, I mean, at worst, the difference between Otton and Musgrave next year is probably going to be like a point per game in fantasy. Like, and it could just be even. Otton could have more. I was surprised. Actually, he had good playoff numbers: 11 targets, 8 catches, 89 yards against the Eagles, 8 targets, 5 catches, 65 yards, and a touchdown against the Lions. That's some pretty damn good numbers for him. I know he had a stretch there. Yeah, if weeks like, I don't know what weeks they are, but middle of the season, like late October to late November, he was involved, like 4 catches, and he was the 4 for 50 tight end during that stretch. So
and we haven't said this in a while. He plays, he's playing 90% of the stats every single game, like literally not a single game where he got less than 91%. So he's out there, he's got some serious like players in front of him, kind of a thing. So, but he's involved. He's only a second-year tight end, so let's see what his career looks like.
Yep, indeed. So, anything else on your Bucs? Any predictions? Are you going to win the NFC South again next year?
I mean, honestly, it wouldn't really shock me, like if everything stays the way it is. Obviously, like I think Atlanta will be like the one to watch with the coaching change kind of a thing. It's like, will they actually use the talent, or I don't want to say supposed talent because, but you know what I'm saying. Like, I don't know. I'm not too worried about the division in general, but that doesn't mean they have to be good. Like it came down to the last week of them having to win the last 2 years, this year and last. In order for them to win the division. So it's not like they're like lights out winning it, but they can definitely stay in games because that defense for sure, and the offense is good enough to win. So there you go.
Yeah, football's funny because like they almost didn't beat the Panthers in the last week of the season. There was like a play where I forget who the receiver was, but they fumbled out the goal to score a touchdown at the goal line and went out of bounds, and it was a touchback. And if that didn't happen, like they could have easily lost that game. I know they won 9-0, but but then they go on to almost like, they were in it against the Lions. Like they made it to the divisional round. It's just funny how small it's like one little play changes an entire season. So, but yeah, that is it for the Buccaneers. We are down to, or next is the Houston Texans. So what are we? 6 more teams? Yeah, 6 more teams, including the Texans. So we'll be back then, and we will catch you guys then.